Greetings and welcome to another edition of Future Talks. I'm your host, Michael Matsuda, the superintendent of the Anaheim Union High School District. And as our 8,000 listeners know, this show is all about the future of education across America. And today we're very honored to have a special guest from the Midwest, from Indiana, specifically George Philhower, who is the superintendent of Eastern Hancock School District, a rural district, I think it's just east of Indianapolis. So, George, welcome to our little show.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, and I met George at a conference, and mutual friend introduced me as an amazing thought leader nationally. And there's some amazing things going on across the United States in education. I think folks are really trying to, they recognize it's time for a shift. And it's people like George that are making that shift, making it actually happen. George, I always start with a little bit about who you are and how did you become superintendent of this rural district?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up actually just down the road from here. I graduated from Shenandoah Schools, which is about the same size as Eastern Hancock. Actually, we're a conference rival. And growing up in Indiana, everybody thinks that they're going to play professional basketball, and the backup plan is you're going to play college basketball and get a free education to go do something else. So that led me to my only 4 years out of Indiana, which was in Milwaukee at a small NAIA school called Cardinal Stritch University, where I got my undergrad, and then met my wife while I was in college, and she lived in Indiana. So we moved back home and settled just east of Indianapolis. And, I started my career as a special education teacher, and that kind of morphed into an admin role. And the district I was at, this is my 5th year at Eastern Hancock. And prior to being at Eastern Hancock, I was at a small district called Western Wayne that's just close to Ohio border. I was there for 13 years in various administrative roles, and the last 2 as superintendent. And couldn't be more excited to be leading where I am now at Eastern Hancock. It's a phenomenal place.
Wow, what a trajectory. And in special ed, you wrote an article about joy in the schools. What does that mean? And what does that mean now with so many challenges with young people in terms of their mental health and anxiety and so forth? What does joy mean, and why is that so important?
Yeah, so we have a strategic plan at Eastern Hancock, like nearly every other district does. And within our strategic plan, we have 4 promises. And those 4 promises are joy, connection, growth, and success. And we put that joy promise as our promise number 1 on purpose, because we think it's got to be our first thing that we're thinking about. That if we can't make the Eastern Hancock a place that people look forward to coming to, that all of the other promises that we want to deliver on just get harder. So, so for us, we think that joy is an invitation. And sometimes that's silly, whimsical things like ice cream on a Friday, or, balloons in the hallways, or donuts on a Tuesday. And sometimes it's more meaningful things that we do, like we do at everybody's birthday day, where we pretend like it's every kid in the district's birthday, because we felt like we've probably got some kids that don't get their birthday celebrated the way that we would want. And so we do a celebration for them. And then oftentimes it's even tied to academics, that we believe that emotion cements learning. So like how kids are feeling about what they're learning is just as important, if not more important, than the thing that they're learning. And too many of our kids go home at night and parents ask them, "What'd you do at school?" And they say, "I don't know," or "nothing," or, we've heard the same story. And I think sometimes it's kids just being kids, but a lot of times it's kids literally not remembering, because every single day feels the same. And so we do little things like 5th graders learning about the American Revolution. And we have somebody with a horse, and it's dressed up like Paul Revere, ride past the classroom window screaming the British are coming, so that they remember that emotion anchors that learning experience, and those kids have something to talk about at home. So for us, joy is our promise number 1. And we think it's the invitation that our best hope is that our kids take a step closer to the work we're doing, and they find the true joy that comes from those other 3 promises.
Yeah, I think you really instinctively touched on an important issue in education, how the emotions are connected to learning. In fact, you wrote an article about moving beyond the test scores. Like a kid might score 100% on a test, but yet 2 weeks later forgetting what that meant, right?
Yeah.
And I think your example of the horse and the guy, yelling the British truck, I mean, there's certainly the emotional connections that kids have to learning. So I think that post-COVID, this is really, really important. And the fact that whether you're in Indiana or California, young people are questioning education. They're questioning finding joy in education, finding meaning. And you just touched upon connecting joy to maybe a purpose or a career pathway. How do you guys bridge that?
Yeah. So, first of all, what you said is really true. So promise number 3 for us is growth. And we know that the research says that kids are spending about 60% of their time at school learning about stuff that they probably already know about. So we define growth as we want kids to learn new things every day that they will remember. And that sounds really simple unless you've ever taught anything ever in your life. And then you know that like causing learning is something it's a skilled craft that educators learn, after a career of doing what they signed up to do. And I also think, Mike, what you said is also true, that our kids are demanding a relevant education. When I was a kid, if I asked my teacher, why do I need to know this? I got in trouble when I went home. But like our kids are growing up with cell phones in their pockets with YouTube and Netflix at their fingertips. They don't even have to tolerate an irrelevant television show. So they're not going to stand for an education that they think is relevant. And I think for educators, it's a really daunting task to try to find relevancy in the stuff they're teaching, especially I think at the high school level where some of the academic content is pretty high. And a lot of educators are like me. We grew up as lifelong educators. I've been in school every day since I was 5. So, I mean, I know a lot about one career field, and that's education. So I think where the career part and the student's future part comes in is when we can connect with the authentic audiences that are in the workplace, and they can maybe help us find the relevance to the information that we're teaching when they're actually the ones applying the content that our kids are learning in the classroom.
You're one of the leading educators to do that, to connect education, to make it more relevant to jobs, career pathways. I think both of us know a lot of CEOs in our regions, and they always say there's a disconnect between K-16 and the world of work. Could you share some of the examples of the work that you're doing on the ground in terms of trying to grow talent and keeping it local?
Yeah. So the pinnacle experience we have for our kids is work-based learning, and about just under 30% of our juniors and seniors are engaged in a work-based learning experience where they are they're spending half of their school time at work. So they're getting paid. They're getting high school credit while they're doing it. And they're also sometimes getting college credit depending on the career field and the programming that's available. But that scales all the way back to middle school and the beginning of high school, and even some in elementary where we're doing some career exploration. And I think the secret sauce to that is looking at it as a team sport. That's not something we can do by ourselves. So we have a strategy that we call our cafe strategy, and that stands for community and family engagement. So we have quarterly meetings where we invite our community partners into our school, or we meet in a more centralized location, since, as you mentioned, we're pretty rural. And we'll get over 100 community partners that show up to those meetings, and we only graduate about 100 kids a year. And then that's our opportunity to hear from those community partners about the strategic work we're doing, and we get their feedback and make adjustments, just so that we can make sure that we're preparing kids for, the demands that they're going to face in their places of business after they graduate high school or go on to college or whatever it is. Regardless of the path, the destination is probably a career, and those career experts are the ones that we want to learn from as much as we possibly can.
Are young people questioning the value of higher ed given the this disconnect and how much it costs to go to colleges now? Because I know in California, there definitely are big discussions going on about what does it all mean? And the old formula is just not working for
Yeah.
this generation.
They are. So one of the things that I do each year, each fall, is I meet with every single junior and senior, and we pull them in one at a time, and we talk to them about, what's your plan after high school, and what are we doing here to prepare you, because we want to make sure that we're doing our job to prepare them. And as we've talked to kids, we're noticing over the last few years they're more and more financially conscious because it's in the news and they're hearing about that all the time. The other piece of that is if you look at the 4-year graduation rate at 4-year universities or the 2-year graduation rate at 2-year universities nationwide, it's pretty terrible. So I think we could all agree that we need some change. And I don't think that means necessarily that fewer kids need to go to college, but I do wonder if the order might shift a little bit. What's happening with some of our kids is the blurring of the lines between career and college is happening, so that some of our kids are getting a job while they're in high school. They maintain that job when they go off to college, and in fact, their employee partners are helping pay for that college experience for them. And I would imagine that as things progress, there'll be more and more opportunities that are more similar to that than the traditional. You just do your 4 years of high school, you go to college, you figure out what you're planning to do while you're in college, and then have a career after that. I really think that the lines being blurred between high school, post-secondary education, and career are going to continue to blur.
So you wrote about this challenge, right? Because as K-12, we have to start rethinking what we're measuring, right? Because everything is sort of based on this, which many critics call an old factory-based model of school. So what does it mean to make that shift? And what does it mean with, what are we shifting to when you talk about how do we move beyond memorizing facts to really measuring what students understand and how they learn over time? How do you go about doing that? What does that mean, and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think this is one of the areas where I feel like we all know that what we're doing is not the right thing, and we don't really have our thumb on exactly what it needs to look like. But it feels like the shift needs to be more towards measuring outcomes than measuring seat time and measuring, whether or not kids are participating in things, and maybe trying to find a way, again, especially at that secondary level, to shift the culture from a culture that really is demanding that kids get a lot of stuff done to one where we're demanding that kids make academic and non-academic progress and growth.
So you made some national news, you in the state of Indiana, in terms of moving toward maybe a microschool model in this rural school, public school setting. Is this a direction that you see going in, where you're shifting toward deeper learning and sort of reflection on learning, applied learning out in the internships and these career pathways? Is that an opportunity that you see?
Yeah, I think so. In Indiana, we had a pretty unique opportunity to do something that's never really been done before. We started a new charter through a separate 501c that works collaboratively with Eastern Hancock, but is separate in terms of governance. And it's called the Indiana Microschool Collaborative. And our intent is that we've launched one site that's pretty local, and then we intend to launch several others over the next several years. And we think that there are, especially in Indiana, there are families that are pretty adamant about having a choice about what their student's school look like. And we're noticing that there's a large number of families that are choosing homeschool. And that's been a trend we've noticed over the last few years. And as we engage in conversations with those families, we've learned that they're not really, some of them are choosing homeschool and they're perfectly happy with that. But there are others that are choosing homeschool because it's the only option they have. So we really felt like that by creating this, we can provide an option that's somewhere in the middle of that continuum between homeschool and the traditional school. And then as we do that, as we design these smaller micro schools, we think that we can co-create these with the families that are interested in being a part of them, and create experiences at school that are feel like they're specifically designed for the kids that are enrolled in them. In fact, that's our vision, is that every kid in Indiana should get to go to a school that feels like it was created just for them. And we think that could be, that's definitely aspirational. And, my best hope is that as we spread these, that it has some impact on, Eastern Hancock and all the other traditional schools as well.
So what is the role of AI in this new concept?
Well, it feels like we're just now dipping our toes into the AI water. I think that there's probably not another profession that needs automation because we've got some overworked people. And our profession's one also that needs some reprofessionalizing. And if we can take as many of these menial tasks off of educators' plates that could be automated, I think that's a wonderful thing. I think also the future looks bright in terms of what I'm seeing for using AI to in terms of student interaction as well, which could also reposition teachers to be the experts that they're trained to be, and kind of come in alongside to help cause learning. So those are my best hopes for AI. And at Eastern Hancock and also Indiana Microschool Collaborative, we're just beginning to dip our toes in the water, but I definitely have high hopes.
It is truly a very exciting time to be an educator, to be right at the forefront of convergence of this arguably tectonic shift that's going on. You also recently wrote an article in EdWeek titled "We Get to Be a Kayak: Why This Superintendent Isn't Panicking About Politics." I think we just talked about an example of being a kayak, this whole microschool redesign that you're on top of. Can you explain to our audience what you meant when it says, "Hey, we get to be a kayak"?
Yeah, I think what we always say is, if you tell me a good idea, I don't need to have a meeting to make it happen. We're small enough and agile enough that I could send 3 text messages and we could try something Monday that you tell me about today. And I think sometimes in our schools that the process for the adaptive change to meet students' needs is so slow that it slows down the progress we're able to make in terms of making the changes that we would like to make for kids. And at Eastern Hancock, we're really agile. We're small enough that I literally meet with every single junior and senior. But I don't think and I say this in this article, that it means only small organizations can do this. That if smaller or larger organizations kind of broke themselves down into smaller pieces that were more agile, that I think it could be replicated and done. And that's the sense that I'm trying to articulate in there. And I think the essence of the article is that, yes, there's lots of changes going on, and that if you've been in education for long enough, you know that it'll happen, it continues to happen. And at the end of the day, we figure it out. And I think that gives me confidence that it's going to be okay. And so I'm not too stressed about whatever changes might happen. And there are days, you know how it is, Mike, that's the job is sometimes stressful. There are days that are stressful, but in general, my confidence is pretty high. And maybe that's naive confidence, but I'll take it any way it comes.
I like this concept that being small is a mindset, right? That you say even in larger districts, it's possible to create a smaller learning community mindset where relationships drive decisions, teams act quickly, and programs are built around real student needs. I know, George, you speak all over, and a lot of people are listening to you. Could you elaborate a little bit more? Because we're coming from a medium-sized district. How could you help people like myself and those in urban spaces that are struggling with building innovation and being nimble?
Yeah. I guess, first of all, I don't know that I could be the expert of anybody else's district because I'm not living it every day. But I think the thing, I probably brainwashed myself over the last several years through the lens of our 4 promises. So what I would be interested in doing with any school that wanted me to help them think through things would be to try to figure out how we can restructure ourselves so that we can, one, know that we are delivering on the promises that we intend to deliver on. And that involves knowing our kids well enough to know if that's true or not. And I think that just thinking about, what that looks like in my own community. So, Eastern Hancock's a very small school, but we're still much bigger than these micro schools that we're putting together. And so something we're thinking about even within our school is figuring out how to make smaller learning communities within our larger school district around, whether that's around students' career needs or around, different ages of students or whatever that might look like, to make sure that we're creating nimble groups, and then also empowering the people that are closest to the work to make the decisions that impact the kids.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point, empowering the people closest to this decision. Because oftentimes, we're talking about teachers on the front lines, but oftentimes they're the last ones included in these decisions. I want to end with this quote from this article, and I would encourage our listeners to look up this article, "We Get to Be a Kayak, Why the Superintendent Isn't Panicking Over Politics." This quote at the last paragraph is, "We can't control the current, but we can choose the way we navigate it. Whether you're steering a kayak or a cruise ship, what matters most is staying close to your community, moving with purpose, and adjusting when the waters change." On behalf of all of our listeners, 25,000 students and 8,000 podcast listeners, George, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.